I stayed quiet while my coworkers took credit for my work and thought I would never react. Until one day, I spoke up in front of everyone and changed everything between us. I was sitting in a conference room, trying to keep my face neutral while my coworker, Brad, walked through a presentation I had built from scratch. Every slide, every idea, every late-night fix, it was all mine. But he stood there like it belonged to him, speaking with this easy confidence, like he had earned it. And I just sat there. My name is Grant Keller. Most people would describe me as calm, easygoing, the kind of guy who doesn't overreact. For a long time, I wore that like a badge of honor. I thought it meant I had control over myself in a way other people didn't. Back then, I really believed silence was strength. The project he was presenting, the Peterson account, had taken everything out of me that week. I stayed up late, cleaned up the strategy, rewrote entire sections that didn't work, and made sure every detail was solid. Brad was technically assigned to help, but help usually meant checking in for 5 minutes and then disappearing. Still, I didn't complain. I told myself it wasn't worth the tension. When the client started nodding along, impressed, I felt this small sense of pride. At least the work was landing. That was what mattered, right? Then my boss, Denise, leaned forward and smiled at Brad. She told him this was exactly the kind of thinking the team needed. I remember waiting, just a second or two, long enough for him to say something. Anything. He didn't. Instead, he just nodded like he deserved it. Something tightened in my chest, but I pushed it down. I told myself not every moment needed a reaction, that speaking up would only make things awkward, that people probably noticed more than they let on. After the meeting, Brad slapped my shoulder and said we made a great team. I nodded like I agreed. That same night, my sister texted me asking for help moving furniture over the weekend. No question, no hesitation, just an assumption I'd say yes. And I did, because that's who I was. The guy who showed up. The guy who didn't make things complicated. The guy who stayed quiet. At the time, I thought I was choosing peace. I didn't realize I was teaching people exactly how to treat me. If I'm being honest, the Peterson account should have been a warning. It wasn't. I told myself it was just one situation. A one-time thing. Brad being Brad. Office politics. Not worth making a big deal out of. That's how it always started, small enough to ignore. A few days later, we had another internal meeting. Nothing major, just a team check-in. I had thrown out an idea the week before about shifting one of our smaller clients toward a more targeted campaign. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was solid, practical, something that could actually work. When I mentioned it the first time, the room barely reacted. A couple nods. Someone checked their phone. Conversation moved on. I didn't push it. Then in that meeting, I heard it again. Same idea, same structure, same wording, almost. But it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from Lindsay. And this time, people paid attention. Denise leaned forward, interested. A couple of the others started building on it, tossing out suggestions like it had just been discovered. Lindsay smiled, clearly enjoying the moment, taking it all in like she'd just cracked something open. I sat there, listening to my own idea being discussed like it belonged to someone else. Again, there was a moment, just a split second, where I could have said something. Not even confrontational. Just a simple, yeah, that's what I was getting at last week. That's all it would have taken. But I didn't. Same reasoning as before. I told myself it wasn't worth it. That interrupting would make me look petty. That the team benefiting from the idea mattered more than who got credit. So I stayed quiet. After the meeting, Lindsay passed by my desk and said something like, "Hey, thanks for mentioning that earlier." It got me thinking. I nodded, said it was no problem. And she walked off without a second thought. That was the pattern. People didn't hide it. They didn't even act like they were doing anything wrong. Because from their perspective, they weren't. There was no resistance. No pushback. No signal that anything crossed a line. Just me, quietly absorbing it. It started bleeding into everything else too. Friends would cancel plans last minute and assume I'd understand. Coworkers would drop tasks on me right before deadlines. Even my sister stopped asking if I was available. She just told me when she needed help. And I kept saying yes. Because saying nothing felt easier than dealing with what might happen if I didn't. But something was shifting. At first, it was subtle, hard to put into words. People weren't just overlooking me anymore. They were starting to rely on the idea that I wouldn't react at all. And that difference? I didn't fully understand it yet, but I was getting close. The thing about staying quiet is that it doesn't feel like a problem at first. It feels like control. I told myself I was choosing my battles, that I was above the small stuff, that reacting to every little slight would just make me like everyone else, loud, defensive, always trying to prove something. So I kept letting things slide. At work, it got more obvious. Brad stopped pretending we were a team. He'd drop work on my desk and walk off like it was already agreed. Lindsay did the same, quick feedback that turned into me rewriting everything. Even Denise leaned on me more, but never in the rooms where it mattered. It wasn't just work anymore either. My sister, Megan, had fully stopped asking for favors. She'd text me things like, "I need you Saturday," like my time was already hers. When I showed up, there was no real appreciation, just a quick thanks, while she moved on to the next thing. Even my friends started treating me like I'd always adjust. If plans changed, I was the one expected to go along with it. If someone needed help, I was the safe option, the one who wouldn't push back. At some point, I started noticing how people talked around me. Not to me, around me. They'd make decisions assuming I'd be fine with it. They'd fill in my reactions before I even had one. It was like I had already agreed without saying a word. That's when it started to feel different. Not like I was choosing silence. More like I had been assigned it. I remember one night, sitting alone in my apartment, replaying the past few weeks in my head. Every moment I let go. Every time I stayed quiet when something felt off. And for the first time, a thought slipped in that I couldn't shake. What if people didn't think I was patient at all? What if they just thought I wouldn't do anything about it? That idea stuck with me longer than I expected. Because deep down, I had a feeling it was true. And once I saw it that way, I started noticing something worse. They weren't testing the line anymore. They had already decided there wasn't one. Looking back, I think the shift really started the moment people stopped even pretending to include me. It wasn't loud. No argument. No big fallout. Just quiet decisions being made without me. The clearest one happened on a Tuesday. We had been working for weeks on a new campaign for a client that could have pushed me into a better position. Bigger visibility. More responsibility. The kind of thing that actually moves your career forward. I had done most of the groundwork. Research, structure, early drafts. Same pattern as always. Keep things running. Fix what needs fixing. Don't make noise about it. So when Denise scheduled a strategy meeting about that exact project, I didn't think twice about it. Until I realized I wasn't invited. At first, I figured it was a mistake. Calendar glitch. Maybe it hadn't updated yet. But then I saw them. Brad, Lindsay, two others from the team, walking into the conference room together, holding printed copies of the work I had put together. My work. I sat at my desk, staring at my screen, pretending I had something important to finish. But I could feel it. That slow, sinking feeling in my chest. No one came to get me. No one even looked my way. And the worst part? It didn't seem strange to them. That's what stuck. Not anger. Not even frustration at first. Just this quiet realization that, in their minds, this made sense. Of course I wasn't in the room. Of course they were the ones discussing it. Because I had never given them a reason to think otherwise. I remember sitting there, hands resting on the keyboard, not typing a single thing. Just listening to the muffled voices through the wall. Occasional laughter. Chairs shifting. Life moving forward without me. There was a moment, again, just a small one, where I could have stood up, walked in, and asked why I wasn't included. It wouldn't have even been dramatic. Just direct. But I didn't move. Same excuse as always. It's not worth it. Don't make it awkward. There'll be other chances. That last one stuck with me. Other chances. Because deep down, I started to question if that was even true. When the meeting ended, they walked out talking like everything was settled. Decisions made. Direction chosen. Brad glanced at me and gave a quick nod, like nothing was off. Like I had already agreed to all of it. And I realized something in that moment that hit harder than anything before. They weren't ignoring me by accident. They were making decisions based on the version of me I had shown them. The one who stayed quiet. The one who didn't push back. The one who, no matter what happened, would still be there afterward, doing the work. And for the first time, I felt something different than patience. It wasn't anger yet, but it was getting close. Because sitting there, watching it all happen, I couldn't shake one simple thought. If I kept saying nothing, this was never going to stop. And I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The moment that really should have changed everything didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt quiet. Almost too quiet. A few days after that meeting I wasn't invited to, Denise called me into her office. That alone wasn't unusual. I figured she needed help fixing something, smoothing things over before it reached a client. That was my role, after all. She closed the door, sat down, and started talking about the campaign. The same one I had built. The same one they had just discussed without me. Except now, it had a direction. A finalized version. And it wasn't mine anymore. Pieces of it were still there. I could hear my structure in the way she described it. Recognize parts of the strategy like hearing your own voice played back through someone else's mouth. But it had been reshaped, adjusted, passed around, turned into something that no longer belonged to me. Denise spoke like I had been part of the process the whole time, like I already knew how it had evolved. She said they needed me to handle the execution phase. Tight deadlines. A lot of moving parts. She trusted me to bring it all together. I sat there, listening, nodding at the right moments. Same as always. But something felt off. Not just the situation, the way she said it. There was no hesitation. No acknowledgement that I hadn't been included earlier. No explanation. No, we should have had you in that room. Nothing. Just expectation. Like my role was obvious. Fix it. Build it. Deliver it. And don't ask questions. I remember looking at her desk while she talked. There was a printed copy of the campaign plan sitting right there, neatly organized, clipped together. Brad's name was on the front. That was the first time something actually settled in my chest in a way I couldn't ignore. Not heat. Not frustration. Clarity. They didn't forget me. They didn't overlook me. They placed me exactly where they expected me to be. Behind the scenes. Useful, but not visible. Reliable, but not credited. And worst of all, predictable. Denise finished talking and asked if I was good with the timeline. That was it. That was the moment. Simple question. Easy answer. Same pattern I'd followed every time before. Just say yes. Keep things moving. Don't make it complicated. I opened my mouth. And for a second, nothing came out. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure if staying quiet was actually helping anything anymore. Or if it had just been making it easier for everyone else. I still nodded in the end. Still said I'd handle it. Still walked out of that office without pushing back. But something had changed. Because as I sat back down at my desk, staring at the work I was about to finish for someone else's credit, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed some kind of line. Not one they drew. One I did. And I had no idea how to step back from it. The strange thing is, I didn't snap right away. I wish I could say I walked out of that office, slammed something down, and finally said what had been building for weeks. That's not how it happened. I kept working. I stayed late again that night, finishing pieces of the campaign that had already been decided without me. Adjusting timelines. Cleaning up details. Fixing gaps I knew would cause problems later. Same routine. Same silence. But this time, it felt different. Not calm. Not controlled. Heavy. Like every task I completed just confirmed something I didn't want to admit. Around 9 that night, the office was mostly empty. Just a few lights on. The low hum of computers, that quiet stillness you only get after hours. That's when I saw the email. Subject line, campaign lead, final approval. I shouldn't have opened it. It wasn't sent to me. But my name wasn't on it either. Brad's was. He was listed as the lead. Main contact. Point person for everything moving forward. There it was. Clear. Official. Written down. No confusion. No gray area. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen longer than I probably should have. Reading the same lines over and over like maybe I'd missed something. But I hadn't. And that's when it finally clicked. They weren't waiting to see if I'd speak up. They had already decided I wouldn't. That thought hit harder than anything before it. Not because of what they did, but because of how certain they were they could do it. I looked around the empty office, at the work sitting on my screen, at the quiet space that suddenly felt a little too familiar. This was where I always ended up. Alone. Finishing things no one else wanted to deal with. And I started asking myself something I hadn't really faced before. When was the last time I actually chose this? Not avoided conflict. Not stayed quiet to keep the peace. Actually chose it. I couldn't come up with an answer. Because somewhere along the way, it stopped being a choice. It became expectation. And I had been meeting it every single time. I shut my laptop slowly, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. No announcement. No message. Just left. And as I stepped out into the cold night air, one thought kept circling in my head. If I didn't change something soon, they weren't going to stop. They were just going to take more. And next time, I had a feeling it wouldn't just be work. The line didn't break all at once. It cracked. And I felt it the next morning. I walked into the office like I always did, Same time, same routine. Grab coffee, sit down, open my laptop. Everything looked normal on the surface. Same people, same noise, same conversations drifting across the room. But I wasn't looking at it the same way anymore. Brad was already there, leaning back in his chair, talking to Denise. I caught pieces of it as I passed by. "Yeah, I'll handle it," he said. "Grant's already got most of it done anyway." That part wasn't said quietly. It wasn't even meant to be. Denise nodded like that made perfect sense. And that was it. No pause. No glance toward me. No hesitation. Just confirmation. I sat down at my desk, hands still for a second, staring at the screen before logging in. Something in me was waiting for that same automatic response. The one that said, just let it go. The one that had carried me through every moment before this. But it didn't come as easily this time. Instead, I noticed everything. The way Brad didn't even acknowledge me when he walked past. The way Lindsay dropped a file on my desk with a quick, "Need this cleaned up," before turning away mid-sentence. The way my inbox had 3 new tasks assigned overnight, none of them discussed with me first. It all felt louder, not because anything had changed, but because I finally saw it for what it was. By lunchtime, Brad had already forwarded me part of the campaign notes. Not a question, not a request, an instruction. "Make sure this is ready by tomorrow." I read that line 3 times. Tomorrow. No context. No discussion. Just expectation. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type the usual response. Something simple. Something agreeable. Got it. That's what I always said. But I didn't type it. I just sat there, staring at the message, feeling that crack from the night before spread a little wider. Because for the first time, I wasn't thinking about keeping the peace. I was thinking about something else. What happens if I don't? That question sat heavier than anything I'd avoided before. Not comfortable, not easy, but real. And as I leaned back in my chair, looking around the office where everyone seemed so sure of how I'd respond, I realized something they didn't. I hadn't answered yet. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like weakness. It felt like a decision, one I hadn't made before. And once that thought settled in, there was no going back to the way things were. I didn't respond to Brad's message. That alone felt strange. Not dramatic. Not bold. Just different. For the first hour, nothing happened. The office moved the same way it always did. People talking, keyboards clicking, phones buzzing. No one noticed that I hadn't answered. But I noticed. Every minute that passed without me typing, "Got it," felt like I was stepping further out of a role I'd been playing for years. Around mid-morning, Brad walked over. He didn't ask if I saw the message. He didn't check if I was busy. He just stood there and said, "You'll have that ready by tomorrow, right?" Same tone. Same assumption. I looked up at him, really looked this time. And for a second, I didn't say anything. Not because I was avoiding it. Because I was choosing not to rush into the answer he expected. There was a pause. Small, but noticeable. He shifted slightly, like the silence wasn't going the way he thought it would. That's when I said it. Calm. Even. No edge to it. "I'm already working on other deadlines." That wasn't discussed with me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. But it landed. I could see it in his face. The confusion first. Then something else. Not quite irritation. Not quite surprise. Just unfamiliar. Like he didn't have a script for that version of me. He gave a short laugh, brushed it off, said something about how it wouldn't take long, that I was the best one for it. That line used to work. It didn't this time. "I'm not taking that on without a conversation," I said. Same tone. Same calm. But now there was no way to pretend I'd agreed. The space between us felt different. Not tense exactly. Just clear. Brad didn't argue. He didn't push. He just nodded, a little stiff, and walked away like he needed to think about what just happened. And that's when I felt it. Not relief. Not victory. Something steadier than that. For the first time, I hadn't filled the silence with compliance. I had let it sit. And in that space, something shifted. It was small. Easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But I saw it. For the rest of the day, people approached me differently. Slight hesitation. Slight pause before assuming anything. Like they were recalculating. Not because I raised my voice. Not because I made a scene. But because, finally, I didn't say yes. The first time you push back, people don't explode. They pause. And that pause tells you everything. The rest of that day felt off. Not in a bad way. Just unfamiliar. Like I had walked into a version of the office where the rules had quietly shifted. Brad didn't come back to my desk. That alone said more than anything he could have argued. Instead, I noticed something else. He started asking Lindsay about the same task. Not telling, asking. Even she looked a little caught off guard by it. That stuck with me, because it wasn't about the work. It was about who he expected to say yes. Later that afternoon, Denise called another quick check-in meeting. Smaller group this time. I was included. That hadn't happened in weeks. I sat at the table, listening as they walked through updates. Same campaign, same moving pieces. But this time, when questions came up about execution, eyes shifted toward me before decisions were made. Not after. Before. It was subtle. If you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. But I didn't miss it. At one point, Denise asked how realistic one of the timelines was. A week ago, that decision would have already been made, handed down for me to fix afterward. This time, she waited. I explained what would actually work. What wouldn't. Where things would break if they pushed it too far. No one interrupted. No one talked over me. They just listened. And adjusted. That was new. After the meeting, Lindsay caught up with me near the hallway. She hesitated before speaking, like she was choosing her words more carefully than usual. She said she hadn't realized how much I'd been handling behind the scenes. I didn't respond right away. Not out of avoidance. Just thinking. Because that was the thing. She hadn't realized. None of them had. Or maybe they had. But it hadn't mattered, because I never made it matter. I gave a short nod and left it at that. No speech. No explanation. Just clarity. By the end of the day, my inbox looked different too. Fewer assumptions. More questions. Messages phrased with "can you" instead of "you need to." Small changes. But real ones. As I packed up to leave, I caught my reflection in the dark screen of my monitor. Same face. Same job. Same place. But something had shifted. Not around me. In me. Because for the first time, I understood something simple. They hadn't misunderstood my silence. They had learned from it. And now, they were learning something new. But I also knew this wasn't the end of it. Because changing how people see you doesn't happen in one moment. It gets tested. And I had a feeling that test was coming sooner than I expected. The test came 2 days later. Same campaign. Final presentation. Bigger room this time. Clients, senior management, the kind of meeting where everything gets locked in. I walked in and immediately saw it. Brad at the front again. Slides ready. Confident posture. Same setup as before. But this time, something was different. My name wasn't missing. It wasn't there at all. Not on the slides. Not in the opening. Not even implied. And I knew exactly what was about to happen. Same pattern. Same outcome. Unless I stopped it. I sat there for the first few minutes, listening as Brad started walking through the work. My work. Again. Same phrasing. Same structure. And I felt that old instinct creep in. Stay quiet. Let it go. Not worth it. But this time, I didn't listen to it. I waited for a pause. Not long. Just enough that no one else filled it. Then I spoke. The room went still. Brad froze mid-sentence. Denise looked at me, surprised, but not dismissive. I leaned forward slightly, steady. I built this campaign. The structure, the strategy, the execution plan. If we're presenting it, I'm going to be part of that conversation. No emotion. No apology. Just facts. For a second, no one said anything. Then something shifted. Not dramatically. Not explosively. But undeniably. Denise nodded once. Told Brad to step aside and let me walk through the details. And just like that, the dynamic changed. Not because I argued. Because I made it impossible to ignore. The rest of the presentation went differently. Questions came to me. Decisions included me. Not as support. As the person responsible. Afterward, there was tension. Of course there was. Brad barely looked at me. Lindsay kept her distance. Even Denise was more careful, more measured. Some relationships cracked a little. But I didn't try to fix that. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be easy. I was being clear. And that mattered more. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I thought about everything that led up to that moment. All the times I stayed quiet. All the lines I let disappear. And the truth finally felt simple. They didn't think I didn't notice. They just thought I wouldn't respond. They were wrong. Because this time, I didn't stay quiet.